More and more workers are turning to microdosing just to be able to cope with life. Now, what is microdosing? Well, it's when you take tiny doses of certain drugs like LSD in order to open up your mind and have an easier time with difficult tasks throughout the day. In fact, there's a woman who wrote a book about this. Her name is Ayelet Waldman. And the book is super interesting. It's titled A Really Good Day, How Microdosing Made a Mega Difference in My Mood, My Marriage, and My Life. And so what she does is she takes 10 micrograms of acid underneath her tongue, about 1/10 of the typical recreational dose every third day. She experimented with this for a month and she realized that it had a huge positive impact on her life. So she said, for the first time in so long, I feel happy, not giddy or out of control, just at ease with myself and the world. When I think about my husband and my children, I feel a gentle sense of love and security. I'm not anxious for them or annoyed with them. When I think of work, I feel optimistic, brimming with ideas, yet not spilling over. Now, she's not an isolated case. There are many people in Silicon Valley who have turned to microdosing and they claim that they experience the same benefits. But I want to be clear about something. So far, there's only really anecdotal evidence regarding this issue, and there haven't been any studies on whether or not microdosing is safe, whether or not it actually does work for some people. There have been some anecdotal cases of people who claim that it actually led to more anxiety or mental health issues. So you never know how it would affect you in particular. But the one quick comment that I want to make about this is, look, a lot of people are turning to this because they're working themselves so hard that they're finding ways to cope with it. And I think that's a little problematic, right? Where it's like there are people who take other non-psychoactive drugs like modafinil in order to be alert and awake with as little sleep as possible.
Caffeine.
Right? Caffeine is another example. I mean, that's what people have been using for a long time now. But I think that says something negative about our culture. I mean, if you're doing it for mental health reasons and it helps you with depression or anxiety, I totally get it. If you're doing things like this because you feel like you need to work harder, I don't know. That's maybe not the greatest thing.
So I have a very strong, uneducated opinion on this.
Okay.
But before we get to that, I'm curious what Jade thinks, because she might have an educated opinion on this.
So I'm a neuroscientist.
Yeah.
When we were talking about the story earlier, I was like, we have to do this story because it's a neuroscience story. So you've got a good point in that there isn't enough research on the effects of LSD, and particularly on the effects of microdosing. I wonder why, because it's usually not the people selling LSD that are funding scientific studies, so that's a whole other problem in itself. But the research, there's some research on LSD going back to the 1960s that shows that there is a very similar state of mind between what's brought on in a drug-induced state and what's brought on in when you're in flow mode. You know, when you're working on something really creative and you find yourself in flow, you're in a similar brainwave pattern between those two states. So, you know, there's a rise in the study of mindfulness. You heard that fashion, like that we need to be more mindful. And so people are advocating for doing more, doing yoga and meditation, exactly. And, you know, if you're doing meditation, it's possible that you will achieve this state of mind of mindfulness and being right in the moment. Or you can microdose with LSD and you will almost have a guaranteed mindfulness state brought on. So whilst there hasn't been enough research to back the health benefits of microdosing with LSD, there is a lot of research on mindfulness, and if we could bring in that same state of mind with a chemical, more of it.
Okay, now that we've dispensed with the science part, let me go to my strong opinions. We kid around sometimes. We want to do a show on the Young Turks called Strong Opinions with Cenk Uygur, let alone others. Anyway, so first off, I like it. Okay, I vote yes.
All right.
I look, you know, I talk in the post games for the members a little bit about how I've done some edibles, perhaps, and I have a wonderful, interesting, different reaction to them. But it makes me appreciate and enjoy things more, right? And it actually lasts sometimes a little bit past when I'm actually high, right? Like I remember the good mood and appreciation that I had, and it helps me down the road. So I kind of related to her. Now, I have never done LSD or anything really other than pot, right? Once in Miami I did X, right? But I related to her sense of like calmness and appreciation and mental well-being. So my second strong opinion is, for God's sake, study it. Right?
Yep.
I mean, it's madness that we don't study these things. Why? Oh, drugs are evil and crazy. Who said so? Because frickin' Richard Nixon did it to target his political opponents, which his henchmen admitted in the 1990s. You schmucks, of course that's why we did it. We did the war on drugs to target the hippies because they were liberals, and to target the blacks because we thought they were taking heroin. Right? And they were opposed to us. Now, it affects the entire world because America, unfortunately, sets world policy on things like drugs. And it's so mental that we're not allowed to even experiment to see what is and is not beneficial.
Right.
We might very well find out, hey, for some people, don't take it. Don't. It might lead to more mental health problems and issues, et cetera, that we didn't anticipate. So now imagine if we found out who it would help and who it would hurt through the research. And then people that it would help, and then you test the dosages. Hey, at this dosage, it actually becomes psychoactive. And if you want that, God bless your heart. Okay, but if you don't want that, then you go to a lower dosage, and the dosage is going to depend on the person. And if it makes people happier, what are we killing ourselves for? For no reason. The fact that we would block science that would help us is mental.
Yeah. Well,
our government needs to microdose so we can get beyond this.
And here's the scary thing, though. I mean, we're about to go into the Trump-pocalypse, the Trump presidency. Scientists everywhere are terrified that their budgets are about to be cut. Do you think that under a Trump presidency, a scientist that pitched research into LSD microdosing is going to be looked upon favorably? Like, we're in this...
and it does, look, Trump, of course, I don't think would look at that type of study
and the people
favorably.
He puts in place.
But we have a long history in this country of politicians, Democrats and Republicans, who have done everything they can to stop research into these types of drugs. And you know, look, it's a common theme. It's always because of corporate interests, right? Marijuana is the prime example of that. Why would pharmaceutical companies want to have competition to a painkiller like OxyContin when marijuana can be grown in your backyard and they can't make money off of it? You know? So that's just one example, but it's something to keep in mind.
That's right, and this is not a new concept in two different ways. One, a lot of cultures throughout the world would trip on psychoactive stuff that was in the plants. That's where all this stuff came from in the first place, right? Mm-hmm. And that was part of human culture until we corporatized everything. And they're like, well, we can't make enough money from the plants. So let's instead, create these chemicals that do it and are slightly more dangerous because you get hooked on them simpler, and let's outlaw the plants. Oh, God, Jesus Christ, what are we doing, right? And then finally, Jade, you're actually a tiny bit wrong on the LSD. Actually, the American government has experimented a lot with LSD. CIA has.
Mm-hmm. CIA.
Right, and so Trump might authorize that, but it wasn't to make anybody feel good.
Yeah.
It was to see if we can control their minds and somehow manipulate them even more. What is wrong with our government? I know what's wrong with it. It's controlled by powerful moneyed interests, et cetera. By that, I just mean multinational corporations. But it's supposed to work for us. It's supposed to make us feel better, not worse. It's supposed to not control us through LSD. Just let us take whatever dosage makes sense of whatever drug that actually makes us feel good rather than bad. It's not that complicated. But the first step is we've got to take back our government so that we can get back to things that help us and get back to logic and reason. Mm-hmm. Are you sick of the mainstream media? Then I got good news for you. We're going to hire some investigative reporters and we're going to go house. We're actually going to investigate what's happening in this country and stand up for you guys. Help us do it. Go to tytnetwork.com/go. If everybody watching this video just gives a little bit of money, we'd have plenty to hire those investigative teams and unleash them on the country.